childhood had now become inseparable. Upon arriving in the capital, Leo was excited and nervous, admitting that he had only heard rumors about the place and didn't know how to act. Karen reassured him, but Leo protested that he was about to meet the emperor and his excitement was justified. Then he began to dream of going to social parties to meet the beauties of the capital. Dacus. Sabina, who had overheard their conversation, joined them and commented that Dacus was an interesting place full of strong fighters and that it would be a good experience for them. She then asked for wine glasses to congratulate them on their first mission, and with sarcasm from Karen, who pointed out the lack of wine glasses in a 13-year-old boy's room, she poured the wine into water cups. Sabina asked Leo if he had tasted wine before, and he admitted that Karen had given him some before. Sabina offered Leo a glass, and he accepted it. Sabina raised her glass, praising their remarkable growth, and Karen thanked her as his teacher. She then announced that the 3 years she had promised to protect them were now over, expressing her regret that she would not be able to see the trouble they would stir up in the capital. Leo was saddened to hear that she would soon be returning to the North Sea and asked if that meant they would not see her again. Sabina scoffed at his sensitivity, then advised him not to go to parties with Karen, explaining that Karen's appearance, talent, and honeyed tongue would attract all the attention. Leo panicked and asked Karen not to get in the way of his chances of marriage, which led Karen to call him an idiot. Karen ordered Leo to stop talking and continue drinking. Later, at Blue Sea Castle, Bali informed Hello of the successful conclusion of the negotiations with Belos. Hello was amazed at their agreement to cede part of their share to Karen and Leo. Bali explained that the young baron's opinion had a strong influence, as he described the deal as an investment in the future. Hello praised the young baron's intelligence and considered that they had gained a reliable ally. Hello entrusted all matters related to the barony of Belos to Bali, but Bali felt there was another reason for his summons, as his father was stingy with praise. His intuition was correct, as Hello revealed that the emperor's summons for Karen was highly unusual, as he had never summoned any member of the family other than Hello himself. Then Hello revealed a disturbing observation. During his private meeting with the emperor, he saw the look of fear of him still in his majesty's eyes. Hello continued his conversation with Bali, explaining that the emperor's fear of him made him believe there was an external influence behind Karen's invitation. Bali agreed that the matter seemed politically motivated and wondered why Hello hadn't refused the emperor's request in this complex political situation. Hello explained that he didn't refuse, because he was curious about the extent of Karen's potential. He explained that Karen had been chosen by the founding ancestor's sword, guillotine, which meant he was destined to be at the center of the family, and would thus inevitably face countless challenges and dangers from external forces. Hello considered this invitation a test. If Karen was to carry the family's future on his shoulders, he must be able to withstand such trials. Hello then asked his son, Bali, if he was worried. Bali was deeply moved but composed himself, and declared with confidence that he believed in his son. Hello was surprised by the response, then smiled, considering it a wonderful answer. The next day, Sabina was preparing to return to the North Sea. Xerus asked her if she was going to say goodbye to the boys, but she said it wasn't necessary because she had enjoyed sharing his stolen wine with them the previous night, and it was better to leave quietly as the boys were busy preparing for their journey. They exchanged farewells, and Xerus promised to provide more wine for her next visit. Before she left, Sabina exchanged a silent glance with Karen, who was watching her from his window. Then she departed, bidding him farewell until their next meeting. Karen thought that the North Sea was like a home to him. He thought about finding some food and wine while he waited. He didn't think Sabina would leave so quickly. As soon as Sabina left, Karen thought that his uncles would now start to make their moves. As if fate were responding to his thoughts, his uncle Tiles suddenly appeared behind him, startling him. At the train station, servants were carrying the young men's luggage. Leo wondered about the reason for all the fuss, and Heinrich explained that it was normal because they were going to meet the emperor as representatives of their family. Karen grumbled about Hans's squad being with them, and Xerus explained their purpose was to protect them, but Hans rudely replied that the purpose was to make sure they didn't cause trouble. Before leaving, Tiles visited Karen in his room. After they greeted each other, Tiles confirmed he had heard about his trip to the capital, then told him he had one request for him. Tiles asked Karen not to act in the capital the same way he acts at Blue Sea Castle. Karen agreed, but realized to himself that his uncle was openly admitting to have been watching him all this time. Tiles warned him that the capital was full of enemies waiting for a chance to bring their family down, and that if Karen gave them any pretext, he would personally punish him severely. As soon as Tiles left, Karen's expression changed. He scoffed at his uncle's threat, realizing he was trying to pressure him with his status as the firstborn son, and vowed to himself that he would turn the tables on his arrogant uncle's face. At the train station, the preparations for departure were complete. Karen was bickering with Hans, when Orha, the former bandit, approached them and thanked him for giving him another chance. Karen replied coolly, then cruelly joked that he would only take him to the capital to throw him in its brutal prison, reminding him not to slack off. Orha begged Karen not to abandon him, to which Karen replied that they would see how he behaved. Xerus gave the boys one last piece of advice, telling them not to cause trouble and to return safely. As the train was about to depart, Bali rushed onto the platform to see his son off. He explained that he came because he wanted to see him again before he left, and told him that his maternal grandfather was also looking forward to his arrival. Bali hugged his son, asking him to return safely, and to try to keep trouble to a minimum, which made Karen laugh. After the train left, while Tiles was in his office, he received information that his second son, Raphael's wife, was plotting something in the capital, but he decided not to take any action for the time being. On the train, Karen asked Hans about the duration of the journey, and he replied that it takes about 6 hours through the autonomous territory of Teba. They talked about Teba, the unusual city where commoners directly elect their mayor, and where commerce and industry flourish more than agriculture, making money the basis of status there. Hans explained that their influence within the empire comes from their vast capital, yet they are closely monitored by other provincial lords. Karen explained that he realized some citizens of the province sometimes flee the tyranny of corrupt lords to autonomous regions. Hans added that the region was friendly to Blue Sea Castle and often entrusted their knights with major tasks. As the boys expressed their desire to secretly visit the city later, Karen suddenly felt something strange, as his sword began to react to an unknown presence. Karen suddenly felt a strange reaction from his sword and realized this meant the sword was sensing imminent danger. He initially wondered if one of his uncles, Tiles or Raphael, had planted someone among the escorts to attack him, but he quickly dismissed the idea, realizing they weren't foolish enough to make such a move. Leo noticed Karen's strange state and called his name, while Karen concluded that the threat must be coming from outside. Urgently, Karen ordered Hans to contact the autonomous territory of Teba immediately. As Hans wondered about the reason for this sudden order, Karen yelled that there was no time to explain and ordered him to inform the other cars to prepare for an imminent attack. The stunned Hans immediately complied, relaying the warning to all escorts who acknowledged receipt and prepared for the attack. Meanwhile, Karen was thinking about the nature of this external threat, wondering how anyone could attack a moving train. Not far from the train's path, a group of masked attackers was preparing to execute their plan. Their leader announced that the time had come, and his men began to move quickly. As the train approached, they hurried to place explosive barrels tied with a fuse on the railway. Once finished, one of them lit the fuse while the leader warned everyone to prepare for the explosion. The train collided with the barrels, resulting in a massive explosion that derailed and destroyed the train. Meanwhile, in the autonomous territory of Teba, the mayor was presiding over a noisy meeting. The attendees were loudly exchanging accusations, with some accusing others of money laundering and that the National Tax Service was vigorously pursuing them, while others defended themselves by accusing the other party of the same offenses. The argument escalated and someone demanded the mayor punish his opponents, whom he called criminals. The mayor wished he hadn't attended the meeting, thinking to himself that he should have retired after serving as finance minister, feeling sorry that the city had turned into a chaotic arena and a constant struggle between the noble and commoner guilds. An aide interrupted the meeting with an urgent message for the mayor, who allowed him to approach after dismissing the bickering attendees. One of the remaining attendees asked if the news was about the tax investigation, but the mayor calmly replied, lighting a cigarette, that this petty investigation no longer mattered at all. When asked if the investigation had been cancelled, he replied, no, saying the investigation could go to hell. He then revealed the shocking news. 5 minutes ago, the train heading to the capital from the Liston family's territory had exploded, and the Grand Duke's 2 grandsons were on board. The man was stunned, and the mayor calmly explained that the meaning of this incident was that they were all as good as dead. Back at the crash site, Karen rose from the wreckage. Hans worriedly asked if he was injured, and Karen replied that it was just minor scratches. Hans immediately requested a status report, and the response came that out of the 11 people, there was 1 serious injury to someone named Dell and 2 minor injuries. Then another report came from Orha's squad, stating 2 deaths among their ranks. Karen noted that the situation must be very serious, since a low-ranking member like Orha was giving the report. Karen asked Hans about their current location, and Hans replied that they were about 10 kilometers from the autonomous territory of Teba. Hans explained that the territory had already been contacted before the 2 young men woke up, and that help should be on its way. Hans then urged Karen and Leo to flee as far as possible, assuring them that his squad would buy them time. But Karen's sword, Guillotine, reacted again, and he realized they were not alone, and that an ambush awaited them. Karen rejected Hans's suggestion to flee, apologizing and telling him it wasn't possible. When Hans asked why, Karen explained that these attackers had destroyed the Emperor's precious railway, which was nothing less than an act of rebellion. He wondered how far they could run from people with such audacity. He then turned to Leo and asked if he could still fight, which Leo enthusiastically agreed to. Karen concluded that there was only one option left. As one of the masked attackers staggered from a surprise blow, Karen appeared behind him with a confident smile. Karen declared that they all must be killed and began the attack. The attacker's leader noted that the number of defenders was more than he expected, so Hans ordered the second squad to get off the cars and form a defensive line to protect the young masters. Hans informed Karen that every enemy attacker was at least a 3-star level, while Karen noted that their leader standing at the front exuded the aura of a 6-star fighter. The leader called him by his name, Karen Listein, and ordered him to drop his weapon and surrender. Karen noticed the leader's voice was magically altered. Then the leader offered to let the knights and servants live in peace if he cooperated quietly. From this offer, Karen deduced and told Hans that the attacker's goal was to capture him alive. He asked him if he realized what that meant. Hans understood what Karen was implying and begged him not to do it. But Karen shouted, wondering why he was stopping him, and declared that since they couldn't kill him, it meant he was the one who could kill them. Leo sighed at his cousin's recklessness, while Hans ordered all squads to engage, to protect the two young masters. A fierce battle broke out, with the Listein knights forming a defensive circle around the two young men as they fought the attackers fiercely. The clash between the knights and the masked men escalated, and the battle between them intensified. Karen was attacking the masked men, moving between them one by one. Karen mocked the attacker's hesitation to approach him and offered to go to them himself. At that, the leader ordered his men to fall back, declaring he would handle Karen himself. Karen commented that the boss had finally decided to show up, but Hans stepped in front of him, telling him to back down because this opponent was too dangerous. The leader mocked Hans, calling him a sea knight, rushing to his death. Hans retorted defiantly that they would see who would die, and charged at him, letting out a war cry. The clash between Hans and the masked attacker leader began. The leader launched a fierce attack, but Hans managed to block it with difficulty, surprised at his ability to deflect such a powerful blow. Through the leader's fighting moves, Hans realized his identity, wondering if he was the 6-star knight from the Sultanate of Bavar, Sion Hakimi. Hans was confused as to why a knight from the Sultanate of Bavar was in the Empire's territory, especially with a non-aggression pact between the two countries. He also wondered why he was specifically targeting the Listein family, as there was no significant animosity between the duchy and the Sultanate. Despite his confusion, Hans decided he would find out the truth for himself, feeling confident because the tide of the battle was turning in their favor, as the two young masters were also fighting well. But in a moment of distraction, Hakimi seized the opportunity and dealt a powerful blow to Hans. Hakimi mocked Hans for letting his focus waver, pointing out that his knight's formation had already collapsed. Hans retorted angrily as he gathered his strength, but Hakimi struck him again and told him that resistance was futile and offered him to surrender. Hakimi looked around and saw that his knights had already been defeated and that his formation had crumbled. Hans offered Hakimi and his men a chance to surrender, assuring them he would guarantee their lives and asking them about the point of dying in a foreign land. Hakimi refused, declaring that he would simply carry out his mission. Suddenly, he unleashed his power violently, causing the mana in his body to recoil. Hans realized that Hakimi did not fear death, and that this reckless move would endanger the two young masters. Hans felt he had no choice but to match his opponent's recklessness and unleash his full power to confront him. At that crucial moment, Karen's voice was heard expressing his disappointment in Hans. Karen suddenly appeared, reminding Hans that his primary mission was to prevent him from causing trouble. He then sarcastically asked if he was about to surrender already. Hakimi turned towards Karen, who proudly confirmed his identity, declaring he was Karen Listein. In a swift move, Karen lunged at Hakimi and defeated him with a single fatal blow. As Hakimi was breathing his last, he called Karen a monster. Karen coolly thanked him for the compliment, but he suddenly noticed his sword, guillotine, vibrating again. Karen realized this meant the danger was not over yet, and accused the dying Hakimi of having one last trick. Hakimi replied that he felt no regret towards Karen and offered him a cryptic apology as an explosive energy began to surround his body. Karen was shocked, and at that moment, Hans yelled, ordering all knights to protect Lord Leo, who was standing stunned in the middle of the battle. Without hesitation, Hans threw himself in front of Karen to shield him from the imminent explosion. Karen yelled, asking what was happening, and Hans told him that Hakimi had used a self-destruction spell. As the explosion began, Hans apologized to Karen, considering what had happened to be due to his own incompetence. In his final moments, the dying Hans pleaded with Karen to save his own life. A massive explosion followed, devastating the surrounding area. In the midst of the chaos, Karen heard a mysterious voice scolding the foolish human who dared to awaken it. The voice announced that since it had tasted the blood of knights for the first time in a while, it would do its part, advising Karen to close his eyes tightly so his eyeballs wouldn't explode. After the smoke cleared, Karen found Hans unconscious on the ground and tried to wake him. Hans woke up angry, scolding Karen for his indifference after he had sacrificed himself to protect him. Karen coolly retorted, asking who had asked him to be saved in that manner. Another voice coming from Karen's sword interrupted them, mocking them and saying that if it weren't for it, Karen wouldn't have survived, and that he should have thanked it. Karen was shocked when he realized his sword was talking. He looked around at the immense destruction caused by the explosion and wondered what had happened. Karen asked the sword if it was an ego sword, a type of sword made from the souls of mad blacksmiths. The sword became enraged by the comparison and threatened to cut off Karen's neck if he repeated it. Karen wondered why it saved him if it intended to kill him for something so trivial. The sword angrily explained that it had used all the mana it had stored to save him from the explosion, and if not for that, it would have already cut off his neck. The sword then complained of exhaustion, and wondered if there was another way to absorb mana besides fighting enemies, suggesting it could also absorb mana from Karen's blood. Karen concluded that since the sword craved its master's blood, it must be a demonic sword. At that moment, a group of knights arrived. Their commander introduced himself as Haley, commander of the Teba Self-Defense Forces. Hans stepped forward and introduced himself to Haley. As they were talking, Karen sheathed his sword. The sword complained that it couldn't talk while inside, to which Karen replied that was wonderful and told it to sleep quietly. Haley recognized Karen as the grandson of the Grand Duke Hallow and expressed his region's full responsibility for the unfortunate incident. He explained that he had come on the mayor's orders to escort the ducal family members to safety. Karen agreed and asked him to take care of the many wounded. While riding in the carriage, Hans asked Karen if he was sure he didn't want to return to Blue Sea Castle, pointing out that the danger might not be over and that the on-site investigations would take time. Karen reassured Hans and told him he had already contacted Sir Xerus, and there was no need to worry excessively. He then changed the subject, asking Hans if he knew the identity of the man who blew himself up. Hans replied that the man was Sween Hakimi, a 6-star knight from the Sultanate of Bavar. Karen began to think about the gravity of the situation, wondering if the non-aggression pact his grandfather had personally signed with the Sultanate was now in jeopardy. Leo admitted that the relationship between the Empire and the Sultanate had been deteriorating, but it hadn't reached a point to justify such an attack. Karen concluded that Hakimi's action alone was sufficient justification to declare war. In the carriage, Karen noticed Leo staring at his blood-stained hands in a state of shock. Leo admitted he hadn't heard what Karen said earlier, wondering confusedly why his hands were trembling. Karen explained that his reaction was normal, as this was the first time he had killed someone, and getting used to taking lives is difficult. But he told Leo that he must overcome this feeling, because this is the nature of life. A short while later, a guard announced that they would soon be arriving in the autonomous territory of Teba. Upon entering the city, Karen looked out the window and commented to himself on how lavish and luxurious its buildings were. The mayor warmly greeted them, welcoming them to the territory of Teba. The mayor expressed his relief at their safe arrival and promised that his region would do its utmost to uncover the mastermind behind the incident, and also pledged full cooperation with the Listane family's investigation. Karen interrupted him, assuring the mayor that they knew the territory of Teba was not involved in the attack, which led to the mayor's visible relief. Hans commented that the mayor had changed a lot since he was the finance minister, to which the mayor replied, regretting having accepted the position of the damned mayor. He then apologized for his informal speech in front of the Duke's grandson. Karen asked him to speak comfortably, as formalities with his elders bothered him. The mayor hesitated at first, saying he couldn't speak informally with a member of a great ducal lineage, but he soon graciously accepted Karen's offer, then corrected himself after accidentally calling him by his first name. To change the atmosphere, the mayor suggested they move to another place to continue their talk. In a private room, Karen began to question the mayor, pointing out that the attackers had used explosives, not mana, to destroy the railway. He explained that explosives can only be obtained through the Military Supply Administration, which is strictly managed by the Empire, making it nearly impossible to smuggle them from within. Karen then proposed his theory, wondering if the explosives had been smuggled from outside the Empire, specifically from the Sultanate of Bavar. He reminded the mayor that the Empire and the Sultanate were the only two capable of manufacturing such high-quality explosives, and hinted that the situation would be embarrassing for the mayor if merchants from Teba were involved in such smuggling. The mayor was shocked by the accuracy of Karen's deduction. The mayor realized that if he didn't agree with Karen's theory, he could be seen as an accomplice, so he was forced to concede that the probability of smuggling was high. In his heart, the mayor cursed the stupid smugglers who had put him in this difficult position. At that point, Karen asked him to remember one thing, that the Seawolf Knights and members of Blue Sea Castle were harmed in this incident. The mayor realized he was being cornered, that the Listane family was known for repaying favors tenfold and debts 100-fold, and that he would be finished if he didn't cooperate. In an attempt to change the subject, the mayor asked Karen about his father's well-being, claiming to know him well and even to be on close terms with Karen's maternal grandfather, Sir Gale. Karen smiled sarcastically, noting that the mayor's sudden resort to name-dropping proved he was a true politician. At that moment, an aide burst into the room with an urgent message from the capital. The mayor thought he already knew its contents, that the Imperial Guard had departed, but the aide clarified that it wasn't just the Imperial Guard. The Commissioner of the Internal Revenue Service himself had left at the head of the 1st Special Division, heading for Taba. The aide revealed that the Commissioner was Gale Barrington, the man known by the nickname the Demon King. When the mayor heard the name Gale, he was shocked and wondered if Sir Gale himself had come. He turned to Karen and asked if he had anticipated this. Karen answered in the affirmative, explaining that his maternal grandfather cared for him so much that he would drop everything to save his grandson if he were in danger. That night, the forces of the Internal Revenue Service's 1st Special Division arrived in the territory of Taba, spreading an atmosphere of tension in the city's crowded streets. Commissioner Gale Barrington led them, with a stern expression that did not bode well. Elsewhere, Grand Duke Hallo was observing the scene, having just arrived. His attendant commented that his arrival was swift, to which Hallo replied that it concerned his grandson. Meanwhile, the merchants of Taba were in a state of anger and confusion. They were surprised by the decision to conduct a sudden tax investigation that very night, without giving them any time to prepare, and they complained that the infamous 1st Special Division would be handling the investigation. In the meeting hall, the mayor was trying to calm them down when Karen and his group entered. One of the senior merchants supported the mayor's position, emphasizing the gravity of the situation. Karen addressed the assembled merchants, explaining to them the magnitude of the disaster they were facing. He reminded them that not only was the Emperor's railway destroyed, but the Grand Duke's grandson and members of Blue Sea Castle were also attacked. He added that the attack was carried out using explosives presumably smuggled through the trade guilds in the territory of Taba, and then asked them if they now understood the seriousness of their position. The merchants were stunned and tried to back down, claiming they were only asking for more time to prepare. Karen asked the merchant who was speaking for his name, and he introduced himself as Viscount Homer of the Homer Trading Group. Karen calmly replied that he would personally make sure to deliver the Viscount's name to his grandfather at the National Tax Service. The Viscount was terrified and begged Karen to reconsider, admitting that he had spoken hastily. At that moment, the arrival of the 1st Special Division and the Commissioner was announced. Gale and his men entered, and he announced the immediate start of the tax investigation into all trade groups. He explained that the tax service had received reports of wealth accumulated through smuggling and tax evasion, and that the Emperor himself had ordered a thorough investigation, demanding everyone's full cooperation. Leo whispered to Hans, asking if the 1st Special Division was really that scary. Hans explained that this division deals with high-ranking merchants and nobles, and due to the power of their opponents, they can even mobilize the Imperial Guard, confirming that they were indeed frightening. After that, Gale approached Karen and greeted him warmly, commenting that 3 years had passed since they last met. Later, Gale and Karen were speaking in private. Gale asked his grandson if he was really okay, and Karen assured him he was. He then asked if he suspected anyone, which Karen denied. When Gale raised the possibility that it might be an internal family matter, Karen dismissed the idea, saying that if his uncles were the perpetrators, they would have left no trace at all. He explained that the culprits in this incident had deliberately left traces behind, as if they wanted it to look like it was the work of the Sultanate of Bavar. Gale asked his grandson if he intended to find and punish the culprits himself, then advised him not to, reminding him that the world is vast and full of powerful people, and that dangers still lurked in this place. He ordered him to stay quiet for now, and that they would leave for the capital the next morning on the Emperor's orders. He assured him that the adults would handle this matter. Karen agreed with a smile, promising he would remain calm. But as Gale walked away, he thought to himself that a power outage would occur, and realized that Karen never intended to keep his promise. That night, at the residence of someone named Owen, there was a flurry of activity as a carriage was hastily loaded. From the carriage, his wife asked him if he would come with them. He reassured her that he would follow them soon and ordered the carriage to depart. As the carriage drove away with his family calling out to him, Owen watched them leave, thinking that he had sent his family away first, and then cursed the situation he found himself in. Elsewhere in the city, Grand Duke Hallo was watching from a rooftop. One of his men informed him that their targets had started to move, so Hallo ordered the cleanup to proceed quickly and without any mistakes. Meanwhile, Karen was in his room, sharpening his sword in the middle of the night. Sir Xeris, who had just arrived, interrupted him, asking if he was planning to stir up trouble again. Karen mentioned he had heard that Commissioner Gale had forbidden him from going out, and asked Xeris if he also planned to stop him. Xeris explained that he had only come to deliver an order from the head of the family, Grand Duke Hallo. Xeris officially recited the order to Karen Listein, youngest grandson of the Listein family. Upon receipt of this order, you are to find the culprits immediately and collect the blood price for the dead. He concluded the order by instructing Karen to show them clearly what the law of Blue Sea Castle means. Karen smiled wickedly upon hearing the order, and declared his obedience to the family head's command. Xeris commented that it would surely be a long night. Later, Karen and Leo were wandering through the eastern districts of Taba in disguise. Leo was grumbling, wondering why he had to play the role of a servant and go to a place where illegal deals were rampant. Karen explained that if two young nobles wandered in this place without escorts, it would raise unnecessary suspicion. Although Leo understood the logic, he continued to grumble about being the one playing the servant. Karen silenced Leo, telling him they were close to the place Xeris had mentioned. Leo was nervous, commenting that the place looked shady and not suitable for young masters. Karen mocked him and offered to let him go back if he was scared. Suddenly, a person appeared before them and asked why they were there. Karen stepped forward and greeted him, explaining he was sent by Sir Xeris. The man welcomed them, saying it was an honor to serve the young masters. The man revealed his face and introduced himself as Julio, then suggested they move to a safe house that had been prepared for them. Inside the safe house, Julio explained that the place was equipped with anti-eavesdropping devices, so they could speak freely. Karen, as a resident of Taba, asked him how he became an informant for the Listane family. Julio replied that he was repaying a kindness Sir Xeris had shown him when he was a child. Karen got straight to the point, saying they had intelligence that someone was planning to attack the Listane family by smuggling explosives and exploiting information about their trip to the capital. Karen asked Julio if he knew the identity of the culprit, and Julio answered yes. He explained that based on the information he had gathered, there were only two trading groups in the black market that dealt with explosives. They were the Kerr Group and the Caligo Group, but he added that the Kerr Group was in the process of withdrawing from the black market. Karen asked about the nature of the Caligo Group, and Julio told him it was a group composed of former slaves who would take any job as long as it was profitable. Julio then revealed a crucial piece of information. He had received news that members of the Caligo Group had left the city earlier that day, which shocked Karen. Julio acknowledged that the Caligo Group's departure at the same time as the attack made them highly suspicious. Karen began to analyze the available options: the Kerr Group, which was withdrawing from the black market, and the Caligo Group, composed of former slaves who would not refuse any profitable job. Leo pointed out that there wasn't enough time to investigate both groups and asked about their next destination. Karen smiled, saying the answer was obvious. People with nothing to lose are always the most reckless. Accordingly, they decided to head to Caligo, and Julio pledged to take them to their black market. Meanwhile, Mayor Glynn was talking with Commissioner Gale. Glynn asked Gale if he was really comfortable letting Karen act on his own. Gale replied that his son-in-law, Grand Duke Hallo, had sent him a personal letter begging him, so he had no other choice, adding that wolves have their own way of dealing with wolves. Gale then revealed that Karen himself had asked him for a favor, to come up with any possible excuse to delay him and keep him out of his way. Despite being impressed by his grandson's audacity, Glynn expressed his concern, noting that Karen was only 13 years old. Gale dismissed these concerns, saying Karen had already proven his ability, and for geniuses, age is just a number. But Glynn insisted that Taba was a place where danger could strike at any time, and that some of the trade groups there were bribing politicians in the capital to expand their influence. He added that while Duke Hallo chose to remain on the border, the powerful noble families in the capital were watching the Listane family closely, and Taba was full of people who would do anything to win their favor. Gale explained that this was the very reason the Emperor had intervened in Taba's affairs, to prevent the Empire from being run by those who only act for their own gain. Gale then dropped a bombshell. Sir Mason was in Taba. Glynn was shocked, wondering if he meant the unbreakable shield, Mason the Eight-Starred. Back with Karen and his group, they finally arrived at the entrance to the Caligo Black Market. Julio confirmed that this was the only entrance, and explained that in emergencies, it could be sealed from the inside, a fact Karen commented was brutal. As they were preparing to descend, they found their way blocked by guards who had seized and bound Julio. One of the guards informed Julio that they were not receiving any customers that day on the boss's orders and told them to go back. When Julio asked why, the guard claimed he didn't know and asked them to leave politely. When they continued to ask questions, the guard drew his sword threateningly. Karen coolly challenged the guard, inviting him to try his luck and draw his sword to see what would happen. The guard hesitated while Julio pleaded with Karen to calm down. At that, Karen turned to Leo, who was disguised as Orha, and ordered him to start Plan B. Leo was confused and shocked, thinking to himself that they never had a Plan B in the first place.